not only about peace in the world, but also about making peace with the people in our personal lives. How do we fix a broken relationship? Our next story offers a step-by-step guide on how to ease anger and build goodwill. Vision TV Insights' Heidi Westfield recently spoke with mediator and author Karen Vagiste.
Carmen, why don't you clean up this mess? What? You are so lazy.
I cleaned up that corner over there. See? Be happy, leave. I'm reading.
You've just made a hole in the mess, so what?
Getting kids to clean up their room can be a real battle. In this case, it sparks a family feud.
Not surprised. No one ever understands me. Least of all you.
Carmen,
Mom.
I don't understand how you can live in this absolute pigsty.
The mother in this dramatization is Karen Vagiste. She's a mediator who, in real life, helps everyone from students to professionals avoid confrontations like this.
I'm sick and tired of
Listen,
it.
just close the book. I'm talking to
Let me
you.
finish this page.
Close it, Carmen.
Karen is also the author of a book called Settle It. It's a guide to using mediation techniques to stop fights from happening.
Karen, before we look at some practical tips on how to manage conflict, we're going to look at mediation itself. How is a mediator different from, say, a judge or a lawyer?
Well, you know, lawyers fight to win a case. In mediation, I ban the fight. Because, you see, the language of mediation should promote a civilized collaboration. You mentioned judges. They tend to want to dictate the terms of the final settlement. And, you know, when you go to court, there is never a resolution that you come upon. Courts determine punishment and blame and guilt. And so, to some people, that is a form of resolution because it satisfies their need for revenge.
So you're not a fighter, you're not a judge. What are you there to do?
I'm the neutral, impartial person. I simply build the bridges to create new understanding. In fact, I redefine conflict. Most people get stuck on the surface level, the facts, he did, she did, and that prolongs the fight, you know? We need to go down deeper to the unresolved emotional needs or what other issues there may be underneath all that.
So I was wondering what you were like as a child. Were you always a mediator, fixing fights at the dinner table or breaking up fights in the schoolyard?
Well, I didn't have the benefit of a large, conflicted family. I'm the only child, so I had a very quiet, introspective childhood. I'm the kid who always wondered why, and today I still ask the question, why, the underlying issues, why the fight? In fact, in my book I list these questions, you know, brainstorming questions, evaluation questions. They're all versions of why things come about. I love to dig down into the underlying root causes.
Now, I understand you grew up in Sweden, which is a peace-loving country.
I was socialized in Sweden, you know, at my early childhood, and would you believe I did not hear angry words? And that, to me, is probably very surprising for the average person.
So how did you get into mediation?
Well, I suppose after seeing people and hearing how they were stuck in a rut. And it was so unnecessary. I find that if you can help them to begin to question the underlying reasons, why they're there, you know, help them to explore the other issues, which when you're living very quickly, and we all multitask our way through the day as well as the evening, we don't have time to slow down to do more exploratory work on our disputes.
Close the book. I'm talking to
Let me
you.
finish this page.
I said close the book.
Almost done.
Listen,
Hold on.
give this
Last
book to me.
sentence.
Carmen,
Almost done.
Carmen.
Oh, look what you've done.
What's going on inside your head at that point and your daughter's head?
Well, Heidi, there's not an awful lot going on. My primitive brain has kicked in. I'm in the fight or flight mode. Most likely I had a really rough day. And so, you know, when there are some conflicts that don't get resolved, the unfinished business of that one leaks over into the next conflict, and then the next conflict. And the last night before, my daughter and I may not have resolved our dispute about curfews. So that factors in too. And so I push the wrong buttons. I play the blame game. I say, you are so lazy. I put her down, she puts me down. And we're in a vicious cycle. We're going nowhere.
So Karen, as a mediator, you know a lot about anger. And I was wondering how anger affects us as an individual.
Well, when somebody gets pumped with anger and they're mad, all too often we find we have to say it, spill our guts, and that is so hurtful. And when someone's really angry, they lose 80% of their hearing. So whatever you say, yelling back and forth, you're just wasting hot air. No one's really listening. And so walk away, cool off. I'm sorry. You know, I didn't want this to go so far. I'm going to go for a walk, cool off, in about 2 hours. Let's talk in the kitchen. Carmen, here's your book.
Leave me alone.
Carmen, we both made mistakes here. We have to talk about it. So meet me in the kitchen. Please, let's just talk.
Fine.
Excuse me?
Fine.
Okay, see you then.
A lot of us don't know how to release anger, and you talk in your book about some of the problems that can cause in our lives. If you could get into that a little bit.
Well, if you can't release it, you're repressing the anger and your stress levels go up. There's a course now in Berkeley called Psychoneuroimmunology. The higher your stress levels go, the lower your immune systems drop down. Your body is open to all kinds of diseases, psychosomatic illnesses.
So it makes you physically weaker when you're angry.
For sure. And it seems like people aren't aware of their body being tired. You're exhausted all the time. I mean, today, the doctor's most common complaint they hear from patients is, I'm so tired. We don't have time to release the anger in a constructive way. It's usually destructive. And that's because life is so fast.
You talk in your book about how anger can cause people to eat too much.
Yes,
and
that's
obese,
true.
How it can cause people to drink too much
yeah.
and to take drugs.
Yes, as well. Yeah, binge eating, emotional cravings. There are underlying issues that have to be addressed, emotional needs, and quite often they are subconscious. Well, people tend to avoid or work late at night in the office, drink to escape the bad feelings, or plan a vacation hoping that when they come back it'll be different. We tend to often just ignore it. And when we do, the tension keeps building in our system. We go into these binge styles of overeating, overworking, alcohol, drugs. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, actually. It's a dead-end street.
And a vicious cycle as a society as well.
Oh, the road rage. I mean, when you repress the anger all the time, it'll leak out on the road. I saw sidewalk rage. Do you want to hear about that?
Sure.
I was driving along. A lady was at the crosswalk, and she's about to step off down the curb. At the last minute, a car slammed on its brakes, and she was jolted. And then she had this long umbrella in her hand.
Oh, I can just imagine what happened next.
And on one hand, there's a long umbrella steel spear at the end of the umbrella. And she walked over to the guy and began to bang his windshield. Of course, he comes out, all hell breaks loose. I wanted to crawl under my car. And I realized that morning when she woke up, she was already up here in her stress level. He was the last person to trigger her, and it just came flooding out. The floodgates opened, and she was having one heck of a time. It was sad.
And that's just one example in one day in one part of the city. So when you magnify that, yeah, what are we seeing in society, do you think, because of anger?
Well, a lot of unhappiness, depression. People, if they lack the skills to resolve issues, they tend to avoid people, avoid situations. And that's so sad. They become tired, fatigued, they give up, they feel hopeless. And they might lose a very special relationship, which again makes them more fearful, more distrustful.
One thing that really struck me in your book was when you talk about anger and how it can be released in a constructive, healthy way, not by banging on somebody's windshield on the sidewalk, except that we don't really know how to do that. So you have an answer to that.
Well, there's a shortcut. You can use certain words. Instead of blaming someone and putting them down, try expressing how you feel as a result of their behavior. You're not attacking the person, but the action. For example, I might say, I feel very isolated every time you go off and don't tell me when you're coming home, etc. And in the future, could you please just let me know ahead? And that may resolve the issue. If not, there's an action plan as well that you can just structure questions when you're both feeling better. Well, the first caption is called Drop Your Gun. And the gun's a metaphor for all the abusive language, the put down, the swearing, the blaming. Even sarcasm builds those barriers. So when you begin your so-called peace talks, you both agree to drop the gun.
And of course, sarcasm's a big one, because people don't really see that as being verbally abusive, but
it's rather commonplace, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so now that you've agreed to use civilized language, when we move on to tuning in, you listen to the surface facts of the issue. And the challenge here is to listen in neutral gear. Don't judge. And that can be really a difficult situation when you're still feeling a little bit of anger or resentment, not to jump in. Just get the facts and you'll exchange your viewpoint on the conflict. And then we move on down to digging down underneath the facts of the issue. Look at the underlying needs, the emotional needs that are often subconscious. We lose sight of them, especially when we're angry, and we live very quickly. We haven't got time to slow it down. And no matter what your current age is, our needs keep changing.
Can you give us an example of that?
Well, for example, if someone feels very abandoned, they have a need for greater acceptance, for more personal security. That's one case. And if a child comes back from school and they're just very angry, emotions are very powerful, especially anger. It'll mask the need for other issues. For example, a child may feel frightened. He may feel unaccepted. He may feel threatened every day. But you see the anger, and he sulks and he doesn't want to talk about it.
So you've got to dig beneath the anger to see the frightened child or see the abandoned person.
In each step there are questions. So if you think your communication skills are rather weak or you can't negotiate, the questions act like a script. And you just ask the questions back and forth, and it'll keep you on the right track. You won't go off into more negative territory, the blame language, for example.
So the key in part 3 then is to look beneath the anger, at what the underlying cause of that anger.
What fueled the anger? So now you have a list of needs. You move on now to fish around or brainstorm. How can we address these needs? And I always say, fishing takes a lot of patience and stamina. Stay with it. You know, try to be creative, inventive. Imagine how you could resolve the issues.
So come up with different plans.
Yeah, all
solutions.
kinds of ideas.
Solution A, B, C.
Yeah, and don't judge them. The next step, we begin to evaluate solutions.
What would that entail? What would you see there?
Well, you have the ideas for solutions from the needs that should be addressed. And you have to just create other solutions. Some of them might be funny. Well, you might have a good laugh at that. And if you get stuck, you might say, well, if somebody were a dentist, an animal trainer, just how would they see this situation? How would they address the needs? And that lightens it up a little bit.
But let's say you're having a fight with a coworker.
Yes.
Would you sit down and say, okay, well, we should both make some compromises, that's solution A. I should compromise, that's solution B. Is that what you're looking at?
A compromise is a little win and a little lose. You're still losing. It's a quick fix. And compromise will never last the long term because you're not digging down deep enough. You're looking at, well, I went this far. You're just trying to satisfy very quickly. So again, the underlying issues have to be addressed. And now we begin to evaluate them. What is fair? What is doable? What is practical? And if someone's solution is really off the wall, you think, this is not fair, try to ask the question. Just very carefully say, well, how does your solution address my need for A, B, or C? And you may learn that they never understood what your need was. We all have filters. We hear things in a certain way, especially our multicultural society. So that at the end of the step, you come to a final resolution. You might have it typed up, depending on who the parties are. You might have a great big hug, just that you've come to a resolution. So from here you move on to the great celebration. Do something to really make it memorable, because the fighting is now over. No more headaches or heartaches, and plus you now have a new way of solving future conflicts. So it becomes part of your lifestyle, hopefully.
What are you seeing from mediation? How does it help people in their lives?
The benefits are it can save a very special relationship with your mother, your child, your in-law, your lover, your co-worker, because you really are rebuilding a bridge to a new understanding. And secondly, I find that it creates emotional fitness. We often talk about what's a healthy heart. And did you know that there's so much news about how, you know, if you have a clogged artery, it'll cause heart failure. But a clogged communication channel will also cause failure in the loving heart. Being emotionally fit is so key. I've talked to heart surgeons, and I'm researching this for maybe another book, how, you know, if you let your heart close and you press the emotions inside you, there's an energy around your heart that tends to really wear down. The heart, there are these guys called cardiopsychologists, and they don't just measure the heart valve activity or the blood flow, they measure the energy field around your heart. And once you open up your heart to share the innermost needs, The energy field is magnified. You connect with other people, which you need to do. We're all social animals.
What would you say is the bottom line for viewers at home who are looking to deal with their own anger in a positive way?
Well, I would say put the ego in your back pocket, because everyone's voice deserves a fair hearing, no matter what their age, how little, how old. You know, build in that time factor, be impartial, listen, because we're so busy. Just slow down, open up your heart.
Very good advice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was great to be here.
You're welcome. And shedding light on anger and mediation and how people can deal with problems in a very chaotic world.
Thank you.